All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. This is the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, January 10th, 2022. Can we have the roll?
Greg Strike.
Here.
Andre Spinelli.
Here.
Jared Gardner.
Here.
Aaron O'Quinn.
Here.
Radhika Krishna.
Here.
Jim Winchester.
Here.
Scott Pullis.
Here.
Matt Dimick.
Here.
Thank you. You have a quorum.
For the record, Jeff Ron is here as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Ron, for clarifying that. We'll move on to disclosures. Commissioner Pullis?
No disclosures.
Commissioner Winchester?
I was absent from the January 3rd meeting, so I won't be participating in the consent agenda. Other than that, no disclosures.
Thank you, Commissioner Winchester. Commissioner O'Quinn?
No disclosure.
Commissioner Krishna?
No disclosures.
Commissioner Spinelli?
No disclosures.
Commissioner Ron?
I was also absent at the January 3rd meeting and will be abstaining from voting on case number 2022-0006.
Thank you, Commissioner Ron. Commissioner Strike?
No disclosures.
And Commissioner Dimick?
No disclosures.
And no disclosures from myself as well. The next item on the agenda is an informational item, case 2022-0011. Is there a presentation from staff?
Hi, yes, I just wanted to speak to the information item. This is an information item, so there is not a public hearing. There is no staff report or public testimony this evening. The Commission shall take no formal action on the concept report. All Municipality of Anchorage transportation projects are required to follow a strategy for developing context-sensitive transportation projects. There are 3 steps in the context-sensitive solutions transportation project review process. The first 2 steps, which are the concept report and the design study report, go before the Planning and Zoning Commission. This concept report is to familiarize the Commission with the project and is distributed as an information item in anticipation of receiving the design study report, which will be reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission at a meeting in the future. Members of the Petitioner Representatives Project Team are in attendance tonight and are available for questions. Please keep in mind that the concept report is meant to be an information item only for the Commission with any questions. Thank you.
So I have one question. I think I saw from some of the comments in there about a desire and perhaps a generalized plan to have the Seward Highway go beneath 36th and then further north from there, but that I saw that there was an issue with the level of the water table for actually having it go under 36th and keeping 36th that grade. What does that look like north of 36th?
I'd like to invite the petitioner representative who are in attendance tonight for them to answer.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Renee Whitesell, and I am a transportation planner with Dow. I am representing the Department of Transportation and Public Facilities at this hearing. Sorry, it's not a hearing, it's an informational item. With regard to the 36th Avenue Interchange, we are currently exploring different options with regard to whether or not it will elevate over or depress under 36th Avenue. Most likely it will end up depressing under because of the water table issue that you spoke about previously. We have previously completed a planning and environmental linkages study, which looks at the area generally from Tudor Road through to approximately 20th Avenue. And as part of the recommended projects identified in that planning and environmental linkage study, we have recommended a roadway that at Benson Boulevard depresses beneath the existing Benson Boulevard roadway and remains depressed beneath Benson Boulevard, Northern Lights Boulevard and Fireweed Lane, before daylighting at approximately 20th Avenue.
Thank you, that answers my question.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I get where you guys are at in the process and all this, and you don't have all the answers, but the only thing I really saw was like Geneva Woods, the subdivision, is not in the project area at all, but it looks like the highway kind of cuts a couple houses off and maybe even gets close to one of those side residential roads. Have you guys looked at that at all and ways to deal with that?
We have looked at that, and we are currently continuing to explore that in further detail. Right now, we're anticipating that the road will not cut into the Geneva Woods area. But as I say, we're currently looking at the right-of-way in that location in particular. We're anticipating having further information on that as part of our DSR submittal and also an upcoming open house.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Commissioner Ron?
Thank you, through the chair, to staff. Is that the extent of the presentation, or will we be hearing from others?
Commissioner Ron, that is the extent of the presentation for tonight. Since this is an informational item, I'm expecting the design study report to come before the commission in the near future, and that is when there will be more of a presentation and there will be a written staff report.
Thank you for that. If I may then fire away through the chair, I do have a few requests for clarification. I'm having trouble aligning the written description of the project limits in the summary project information on the title page. We talk about 36th Avenue between Latouche and Denali Street. Within the report itself, on page 2, it doesn't look like it goes that far west. And would question why the project limits did not extend further east with respect to minor arterials or residential streets and the queuing that can occur there trying to get onto 36th. So not sure who can help me better understand why the proposed project limits are set as they are, and in fact, what are they?
The written description uses the term approximately Latouche Street. What is shown in the site location map is an expectation that we'll be able to reach grade along 36th Avenue further west of that location. In terms of your question about dealing with minor arterial queuing, I can't answer that off the top of my head, I'm sorry, and I would like to take that back to the project team for clarification.
Thank you. That's a specific example to the general question. I think you understand the basis of it. If we're talking about improving traffic flow, then how is that in fact defining what the project limits are? I have a follow-up question around safety, understanding that this is a concept level report. In it, I was expecting to see more around safety. Both motorized and non-motorized. Perhaps that'll be coming in the design study report, but again, a general comment, if in fact safety is one of the highest level objectives of this project, then how might those objectives be achieved even at the concept level?
So this project is focused on both motorized and non-motorized transportation and improving crossings at all locations for it. You are absolutely accurate. The information that we're including in the DSR does go into a lot more detail, specifically on the non-motorized facility improvements.
Thank you. And if I may have one follow-up question, and then I'll be quiet for a bit. There's language around fatal flaw. The chair previously asked a question about the specific intersection in question and depressed versus elevated and how the water table may impact that. A strict interpretation of the language used in this concept study report could lead a reader to believe that due to that fatal flaw, those alternatives would not be further analyzed in a DSR. So can you give me some comfort on that topic? I would like to see more analysis associated with the broader suite of alternatives and the reasoning behind that fatal flaw statement.
I'll give you assurance that all three of the alternatives being evaluated are presented in further detail in the DSR, and more information will be available in that document.
Can you speak to how this project is interfacing with the Seward Glen Mobility Project? They're in a PEL study right now, and I think there's some other highway projects in the general vicinity, how all these will interact.
With regard to the Seward Glen Mobility Study, that project commences at approximately 20th Avenue. So with regard to the 36th Avenue interchange, our expectation is that it will tie into existing grade prior to the intersection of Seward Highway and Benson Boulevard.
Sorry, can I, sorry to interrupt. Can you speak a little closer to the microphone? We've got some folks
Sure.
on the phone. I think it's a
Okay.
challenge.
With regard to the Seward Glen Mobility Study, this particular project deals specifically with 36th Avenue interchange and will tie in prior to the intersection of the Seward Highway and Benson Boulevard. The Midtown Congestion Relief Planning and Environmental Linkage Study evaluates roadway and recommends projects all the way through about 20th Avenue, and the Seward Glen Mobility Study picks up at 20th Avenue. We anticipate that the two will work well together, and in terms of the Midtown Congestion Relief Project, the intention was that a future PEL would look north of that 20th Avenue intersection.
Okay, I missed the queue earlier, but I think I'm on track now. I see Commissioner Polis in the queue if you had a question.
It's still hanging out, but I got one more question I can ask. Has it been determined whether an environmental assessment will be completed yet? Do you know?
A class of action determination has been completed, and that has concluded a categorical exclusion.
All right, thank you.
And Commissioner Krishna, I see you as well.
Thank you. So I see that the Airport Heights, Rogers Park, and Tudor area community councils all had the same feedback in their resolutions, and I'm wondering if you could shed some more light on why those community councils had a great preference for a depressed freeway. Was it for non-motorized safety? Was it for neighborhood connection? I'm just trying to understand what the community's concerns are and why they prefer that alternative.
It's a very good question, and I can't necessarily speak to what their thoughts and feelings were around it, but certainly the feedback that we received through Midtown Congestion Relief PEL study was that they wanted to see all the interchanges evaluated depressed below Seward Highway.
And then I'll just ask, what is the expected timeline for the design study or the next step?
You good for me to?
We just received the completed application for the design study report. I do not recall the exact meeting date. I believe it was the first meeting in April, though.
Thank you. Okay, any further questions before we move on? I don't see any further questions, so thank you very much for the information.
Thank you.
And again, just to confirm, so you don't need any action from us on this today?
Chair, that is correct.
Okay, thank you. With that, then, we will move on to the next item in the agenda, which is our consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve? Okay, that's moved by Commissioner Polis, seconded by Commissioner Krishna. Any objection? Seeing no objection, that motion passes. Next item on the agenda is a non-public hearing item, case 2021-0140, which is the long-range planning review and recommendation for the ASD six-year capital improvement plan. I don't know if there's further presentation from the staff. I know we had a chance to see this last week.
No, Mr. Chair, we don't have any additional materials.
And then I guess just to confirm for this one, what you would be looking for from the commission is a motion to recommend approval of the resolution that we received in our packets. Is that correct?
Yeah, that'd be correct. There should be a resolution in the packet, and it'd be forwarded on, the CIP would be forwarded on to the Assembly for approval by them. The Anchorage School District did express interest in attending this evening via Teams. I'm not sure if they made it on or not, but they may be available if there are any additional questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission, or if not, what's the will of the body? So motion by Commissioner O'Quinn.
In the matter of case number 2021-0140, I recommend that the Planning and Zoning Commission forward the proposed CIP to the Anchorage Assembly for approval.
Okay, that motion is seconded by Commissioner Krishna. Does anyone wish to speak to the motion?
I'd just like to make some findings that the the projects listed in the ASD six-year CIP, including its capital budget, capital improvement projects and deferred requirements projects are consistent with the direction of the development and the comprehensive plan and other adopted plans. Building expansions will require municipal review for infrastructure needs when proposed designs are subject to municipal site plan and building safety reviews. And the PZC appreciates the opportunity to review and comment on the ASD CIP each year and advise its conformance with the adopted municipal plans.
Okay, seeing no other comments pending, we'll go ahead and call the vote.
Mr. Strike?
Yes.
Mr. Dimick?
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes. Next, we'll move to the public hearing items. Before we do that, I will read the procedure by which the public may speak to the commission at its meetings, and that is as follows. After the staff presentation is completed on public hearing items, the chair will ask for public testimony on the issue. Persons who wish to testify will follow the time limits established in the commission rules of procedure Petitioners, including all of his or her representatives, receive 10 minutes. Part of this time may be reserved for rebuttal. Representatives of groups, such as community councils, PTAs, etc., receive 5 minutes. Individuals receive 3 minutes. When your testimony is complete, you may be asked questions by the commission. You may only testify once on any issue unless questioned by the commission. An individual may have appeal rights relating to any action the Planning and Zoning Commission takes, except commission recommendations to the Assembly which are not appealable. Appeals must be filed with the clerk's office within 20 days after approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission of the resolution, which is the commission's final decision. A fee for the appeal is required at the time of filing. So the first case we'll hear is case 2022-0004. Can we receive a presentation, please? Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a request for a conditional use permit to allow for the development of a new bulk storage of hazardous material facility within the I-2 Heavy Industrial District. The site will be operated by Brentag Pacific Incorporated, a chemical distribution company that has locations throughout North and South America, Asia, and Europe. In Alaska, they have a distribution facility within Fairbanks and are looking to establish themselves locally here in town. The site is located along East 104th Avenue between Old Seward Highway and C Street in South Anchorage. The proposed use will be located within an existing industrially designed structure that is approximately 13,954 square feet in size. In addition to storing hazardous material, the site will house a small office space for use by employees and a small manufacturing area for the blending and production of non-hazardous products. The Planning Department has evaluated the application in accordance with Anchorage Municipal Code and presents the following findings for the Commission's consideration this evening. For approval criteria 1, we do believe the criteria is met. The petition site is classified as general industrial per the 2040 Anchorage land use plan map, and the proposed use is consistent with this classification. It's also consistent with the following goals and policies of the 2040 Anchorage land use plan. That's Goal 7, Goal 9, Policy 9.3. It's also compliant with the dimensional standards of Chapter 6, as well as several of the design standards of Chapter 7. They also have secured and been established legally non-conforming rights for lack of site perimeter landscaping, as well as some turning and maneuvering on site, as well as a lack of pedestrian amenities on site. For approval criteria 2, we do believe the criteria is met. The petition site is zoned I-2 Heavy Industrial, which permits the bulk storage of hazardous materials subject to the approval of a conditional use permit. And the proposed facility will be operated in a manner that's consistent with the intent of the I-2 district. And it's important to note that there's no district-specific standards that are applicable to this specific use. For approval criteria 3, we do believe the criteria is met. There are no residential districts, schools, hospitals, or parks within 1,000 feet of this property, and the proposed use is consistent with all other use-specific standards for bulk storage of hazardous materials. For approval criteria 4, we do also believe that this is met. The petition site is approximately 4.92 acres in size. The topography is generally flat and the shape of the lot is rectangular. This lot orientation and size allows for the adequate space for the placement of structures, vehicular circulation facilities, parking, accommodation of emergency vehicles, stormwater retention, and required landscaping that can meet the needs and requirements of the proposed use. Additionally, the uniform nature of the site enhances the ease to provide site security and implement spill response measures should they become necessary. For approval criteria 5, we do also believe this is met. The surrounding neighborhood and properties are all zoned I-2 Heavy Industrial. Various industrial uses such as manufacturing, storage, and distribution facilities are located within the vicinity. The majority of the proposed facilities operations will take place within the enclosed warehouse area. Because of this, it's unlikely that the presence of this use will have a negative effect on the character of the surrounding area. The operators of the storage facility have accounted for off-site odor mitigation prevention, site security, and spill prevention and response procedures. This industrial use will be established within an industrial area that is well suited to accommodate it. There should be no significant impact to surrounding properties that would substantially limit, impair, or prevent the use of their properties in a lawful manner. For approval criteria 6, we do believe that this is met. The existing 13,954 square foot building has 35 docking bays, of which only 3 will be utilized by the proposed use. There will generally be less than 10 truck deliveries and pickups per day. This is a drastic reduction in the amount of commercial truck traffic at the site as compared to the previous or other potential uses. Daily hours of operation will be generally within standard workday hours except for extenuating circumstances. There will be a minimal change in the footprint of structures on site due to the construction of a 1,170-foot canopy to shelter products stored outside the facility. There may be some additional noise generated during the construction of this canopy. However, upon construction, the majority of facility operations will be within the enclosed facility, and noise on site will be regulated under Anchorage Municipal Code, Title 15, Chapter 70, Noise Control. For approval criteria 7, we do believe this is met. Due to the hazardous nature of the materials stored within the proposed facility, the operators will make every effort to prevent any off-site impacts. To prevent spills, a 2-inch curb will be installed along the interior perimeter of the warehouse area that will effectively contain the entire liquid volume of products stored on site should a massive spill occur. All products stored outside will be covered to prevent adverse impacts from rain and snow. All materials stored on site will be within sealed containers that are unlikely to emit any noticeable odor. Trespassing, theft, and vandalism will be addressed by a strict security plan that meets the federal requirements for hazardous waste storage, and compliance with all local, state, and federal regulation will be required of all staff and visitors. It appears that the applicant will be taking a very proactive approach to mitigating and offsetting any and all significant adverse impacts they may or could have on surrounding properties. For approval criteria 8, we do believe that criteria is met. The petition site has direct access to East 104th Avenue via 2 existing driveways. East 104th Avenue is considered classified as a local street in the 2014 Official Streets and Highways Plan. And local streets see less than 2,000 daily vehicle trips. Access to East 104th is provided via either Old Seward Highway or C Street. And the number of employees on site will likely not exceed 5, and the number of daily truck deliveries will be less than 10. So given this, it does not appear that the site will generate significant traffic, and local street serving the site is adequate to handle the anticipated traffic volumes. Fixed route public transportation is not available at or anywhere near the petition site. Approval criteria 9. This criteria is met. The site is located within the Anchorage Roads and Drainage Service Area, the Building Service Area, Police and Fire Service Area, and Park Service Area. And public water and sewer services are available to the petition site. And taking these findings into account, the department does recommend approval subject to the conditions on page 9. However, in my discussions with the applicant today, we did discuss whether or not it was necessary to move forward with condition number 3 as written. And at this time, the planning department does not believe that condition number 3 is necessary for this or should be a condition of approval for the conditional use permit, but rather should be made advisory. And then the stormwater pollution prevention plan will be a requirement of any tenant improvements. So it's more appropriate to tie it to the building permit than the conditional use permit. So moving forward, our recommendation would be to hold the applicant to conditions of approval 1 and 2 on page 9 of the staff report and make condition number 3 advisory only. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any questions before we start the hearing? I see Commissioner Ron in the queue.
Thank you through the chair, Mr. Yell. Appreciate the presentation and detailed walkthrough. Question around the use of the terminology hazardous waste. 2 references to it that I noticed on page 3 and page 7. It's been a few years since I've been more directly in this line of work, but still recall there being some pretty important distinctions between hazardous materials and hazardous waste across a number of issues. So just want to see if that may be an oversight and improper use of terminology, or in fact, there was intention in using the term hazardous waste under Goal 7, page 3, and Item 7 on page 7. I guess the basis of my question is around, are we talking about a hazardous materials facility, which I understand from the rest of the content, or is there a component of hazardous waste storage in a more traditional sense?
Through the chair, Commissioner Ron, yeah, I appreciate your attention to detail. That's just a simple typo on my part. This is just hazardous material. There'll be no hazardous waste stored on site.
Thank you. Then for the record, I would propose that we strike the term hazardous waste and revert to hazardous materials in those two instances, seeking no exception there.
Okay, is there a representative from the petitioner?
How's it going? Unfortunately, my VP and the president of our company were kind of delayed by the airlines, so you get me. I'm the branch manager for Alaska. I also cover parts of Guam, Hawaii, and Russia.
Can you state your name for the record before you begin? And if you're able to, you could probably adjust the mic to lift it up since perfect.
There you go. Jonathan Thomas, and I'm based out of Fairbanks. I work at our Fairbanks location. I'd like to reserve a couple minutes there at the end if need be. So I'm going to kind of go through this. So here's a small agenda, introduction. Obviously, I don't have anybody here. So company overview, project location overview, and the site, facility, warehouse. Brenntag is a leading global supplier of chemicals in the world. We're based out of Germany. Here in the U.S., our market's about 50 billion euros, so about $57 billion in the U.S. alone. We have about, I think it's 172 sites in the U.S. We are on the German Stock Exchange, so it's a publicly traded company. We are one of the leaders in industry metrics such as industry spills, DOT compliance. We have one of the largest private fleets of trucks. So our numbers are towards the bottom there. LTIs this year, we're down at 0. Recordables at 1.38, when the average metric in private industry is 2.8. So pretty safe company. Any questions there? This is the proposed site on 431 104th. It's the old PAF building, if you guys are unfamiliar, right next to the Pepsi company. There it is again, Pepsi, modular place, Univar's up in the corner there. This is the facility. It's a commercial warehouse. So the parking 11 spaces, office 8. We've got about 20 landscapings towards the front and the east there, I do believe. The building's situated towards the front of the yard. It's on a paved. Towards the back part of the yard is gravel. So our planned activities for this are going to be warehouse distribution and packaging materials. We bring in quite a few materials into Anchorage already and down onto the Kenai Peninsula to support oil and gas, municipalities, stuff like that. So I looked at it as a cut out the transportation. Instead of moving product into Fairbanks and then back down to Anchorage, I just want to cut that distribution chain out there, that little bit of logistics. We're going to have 2 non-hazardous blend tanks on site where we blend products for the Anchorage market, specifically DEF and glycols. And then we'll have some office workers in there too. Majority of the product is going to arrive on site under UN packaging. It's going to be stored until the customers place an order, ship same containers it arrives in unless we're making it ourselves. Approximately 4 to 6 inbound, outbound vans and trailers a day. The next one looks a little different to each person. I guess it's how much risk tolerance you have, right? But corrosives, oxidizers, non-hazardous materials. To me, that's just the chemicals that clean our water that we use in power plants, stuff like that. So it's pretty typical chemicals. Bleaches in your pools. We will have some flammables stored outside in secondary containment under a canopy to keep the rain and snow off. We have a fire suppression system inside the building, alarm system inside the building. It's completely fenced off, and it's going to have monitoring. Another picture of it, and there's our proposed outdoor flammable storage shed. So we're going to have 3 dock doors towards the front that we're going to use for staging product and moving product onto vans. We'll have some acid stored in there, some non-haz through the middle, a little bit of alkalines in the back, and then there is a front office space. Has a sprinkler system with our calculation, takes a containment that we're going to build into the facility, lets us run the sprinklers for 20 minutes without spilling anything outside the building. It's going to be designed to meet the 2018 International Fire Code and building codes, as well as meet city, state, federal, and corporate brand tag requirements to protect the employees and environment and community. All the rest of the dock doors are going to be shut off. We're just going to seal those up because we're not a cross-dock operation. And it'll have secondary containment for materials designed to meet the codes above. And then I also wanted to introduce Laquita. Most of you know she's working with us here in Anchorage for this facility. So I ran that pretty quick, so I got a couple minutes left if anyone has any questions.
Question from Mr. Strike.
Commissioner Strike, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I know that we began the discussion here regarding storing hazardous material, hazmat storage, yet I'm hearing blending facility, which would seem that it might lend itself into a manufacturing process. And just a question for the city and for the staff, there's a manufacturing allowed in this facility under this conditional use?
Mr. Chair, they do have a use description that was included in the application packet. That is on pages 62 and 63. There are 3 uses that are going to be on site. So you'll have the bulk storage of hazardous material, which requires the conditional use permit within the I-2 zoning district. You're also going to have a small office space that is permitted by right in the I-2, and you're also going to have a manufacturing heavy use that's also going to be on site. That's the blending operation and mixing operation, and that is permitted by right within the I-2 and does not require a conditional use permit. So thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ron?
Thank you, through the chair. Mr. Thomas, thanks for the additional details. I appreciate some of the technical information provided. You did talk to us briefly about those 2 large mixing tanks, 6,000 gallons each. The question I'm leading to is around the design of the secondary containment. My understanding, based on the information provided, is that secondary containment will allow for a volume of up to 12,900 gallons of material and water from the fire suppressant system. So is that sized based on those 6,000 gallon non-hazardous tanks? I guess the question I'm getting to is, well, first let's answer that question, then I'll go on from there.
So you're probably thinking M standards, which is 110% of the largest vessel, which is different. Our engineers have figured in the size of the vessel plus the ability to run the sprinkler system for an additional 20 minutes on top of that.
I appreciate that. My understanding is my question is, why is it sized on a non-haz tank?
There is hazardous materials stored within that area. Mm-hmm. So you have your acids and your caustics stored in there too. It's actually sized for the sprinkler system. It's not sized for the tanks.
Okay. Can you speak to us a little bit about what the largest container of hazardous materials might be that's stored on site, isotopes of?
Generally, in chemical distribution, we break down bulk packaging down into smaller packaging. 330-gallon totes is a very common size of package. You'll mostly find DEFs, caustics, bleaches, peroxides in that size. That'll go to city water treatment plants and pools and stuff like that. And then barrels, 55-gallon drums. Carboys is a 15-gallon package, and then buckets are 5 gallons.
Okay. My final question is around the safety stats you provided. Commend your performance there. My understanding is that reportable spills, environmental performance, is not always captured in LTI or TRI. So can you talk to the commission a little bit about your past and planned environmental performance?
So I can speak to Fairbanks. I've been at that facility for 4.5 years. We follow required reporting on spills and hazardous material spills. Generally with UN package, which is tested to standards, most of the time they're built to withstand a drop from a certain height without rupturing that package. Is there spills? Yes. And the fact that sometimes packaging comes in and it's leaking, usually we refuse a load like that. The carrier should never pick it up like that. We contract services in order to mitigate any hazards, and we train our people a lot on cleaning up spills. And by spills, I mean a teaspoon is considered a spill to us. So, a couple of drops, we're cleaning it up. It's not something that we let fester and get bigger.
Commissioner O'Quinn?
Yeah, just real quick on the containment, is that something that you guys have built in, or is that a minimum requirement by building code or fire code or something like that?
That's something that Brentag is building in.
Okay, so in order for us to ensure that it made it into the building, we would probably have to add that as a condition of the conditional use permit. Is that correct?
I don't believe it's part of the conditional use permit.
Through the chair, because that is listed in the application narrative, condition of approval number 1 in the staff packet holds the applicant to anything that they show in their plans and in their narrative. So they would be required to do that containment system as described in the application.
Great, thanks.
Okay, thank you. You've got 5 minutes, 24 seconds reserved for rebuttal, should you wish to take it. And before we get there, is there anyone from the public wishing to speak to this matter?
Niall Sherwood Williams. So one of the best parts of the testimony I've heard so far was talking about the difference between hazardous materials and hazardous waste. So I'm thinking about, okay, well, what actually makes that difference? Does it become waste when it enters the environment or affects another human being in a negative way? I'd say that's probably what waste is. When you're transporting and mixing chemicals, I'd like to first say I'd like to request that the commission request the applicant to submit their full MSDS for their intended uses, what chemicals will be there specifically, the exact numbers, so that the citizens can look them up before the assembly vote or any further votes. Whenever you're mixing things, you're going to have byproducts. There's going to be stuff you're going to clean out of the tanks. There is going to be waste that's going to be stored there. It's going to be a natural result of mixing things together. So you're going to be involved with EPA, DEC, DOT. It's right near the railroad, so I'd like to ask, does the applicant have any links with the Alaska Railroad Corporation or with any other federal governmental agency? Are they a quasi-NGO? Or are they in fact just a privately held company? I frankly think the hazardous waste, it goes beyond that as well. What is the final net result of the chemical? What does it do? He already said we're putting chlorine, hydrogen peroxide, and other chemicals in the water. I have a problem with that. We have the most beautiful water in the whole world here in Alaska, Klutna Glacier water, and yet we seek to poison it. And I know this is outside of the exact topic of this application, but that's how it affects my fellow citizens here in Anchorage. Thank you for putting that up on the board. I'd like to say that I don't want any more chemicals in Anchorage. Get them out.
Thank you for your testimony. I'll just note, I also am a fan of the water that we have available here in Alaska. I agree with you strongly on that point. Is there anyone else wishing to speak to this matter this evening? Okay, seeing no one, you've got your 5 minutes and 24 seconds for rebuttal.
Chemicals, unfortunately, are part of our daily lives. It's in everything that we eat, drink, the mascara on your face. Chemicals are not something to be scared of. In fact, it's the complete opposite. Do you want to go to a public pool that nobody's doused with chlorine? How many germs could you get? I agree, we have great water in Alaska, but it's usually hard. And what do we add to it? Salt, sodium chloride. That is a chemical. Brentag is very, very well at what we do. Largest in the world. And I agree. It sounds bad when you say chemicals, but you have to think. Soy lectin oil. Taco Loco uses it here in the state to fry their tortillas in. It is considered a chemical. The salt that we put on our roads, the calcium chlorides for dust control, potassium acetate that it goes on planes to defrost the wings. It's not something to be feared. On top of that, some of the chemicals that we have are, that I carry specifically in Fairbanks are great chemicals. There's a lot of mines around there and they use cyanides and stuff like that. I carry the chemicals that counteract those chemicals. So chemicals is not something to be scared of. We have to treat our water. It's just the nature of the beast. Power plants run with chemicals in them. Carbon is considered a chemical. Activated charcoal is a chemical. That's unfortunate. That's the way it is, but chemicals is a big business, and I would rather be a responsible provider than have someone down the street dealing it out of the back of their truck. So, now we do talk about hazardous materials and hazardous waste and how you deal with it and it's produced. Fortunately, I've been in this industry for 25 years and I know how to deal with it. And we don't store it on site. We try to eliminate that. We have procedures, policies in place. We use every drop that comes in and out of our facility. So I think that's the only rebuttal I really have, if anyone has any questions on it.
Can I just ask you real quick, the information that you put up on the slide there, is that part of the application? Is that in the packet?
What's that?
Hi, this is Laquita Jamalski with Dow. Yes, this information is in your packet as part of the use determination that we did with the municipality. This was the same information that was provided to them.
The chemicals that are on that list are specific to Anchorage, chemicals we already moved down here. DEF glycols are non-hazardous. You can see quite a few of them aren't hazardous. Sodium hydroxide, sodium hypochlorite, everybody knows that one, that's bleach. Ammonia fluoride, potassium permanganate, those are used in water treatment. Sulfuric acid is used in power generation, so is hydrochloric acid. Citric acid's in almost everything, but it's also used in water treatment. So calcium chloride, that's a pretty standard chemical. So if you have questions on that, DEF is obviously used to mitigate hazards in diesel fuel. It's required in all new engines. So that's just urea, pearled urea mixed with water. So it's a pretty straightforward list.
Thank you. And I guess just a question for staff. I don't see the list in the materials we have. Is that, to the extent anyone's interested in looking at that, could that be accessible?
Through the chair, so I believe that list of chemicals and, the application for the use determination and all the supporting documents is with that use determination file, which is available at the planning department office of the planning department. But that list of chemicals, it does not appear like it is in this staff packet.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Ron?
Thank you through the chair. Mr. Thomas, thank you for talking to the commission in a straightforward way. I greatly appreciate that. On the topic of disclosure and public access to chemical information, again, it's been a few years, but is this facility falling under EPCRA or TRI reporting requirements such that local fire department and or EPA or others that Brentag would have to report things to and then be made publicly available?
So depending on the Brentag facility, like I said, there's several of them in the U.S. In Fairbanks, we go to ISO 9001 standards. We have EPA, DEC, DHS, and then yes, we do outreach to local fire and police departments twice a year by permit, required by DHS. There's a couple more chemicals. This is just the appendix. It was in our permit, so I thought I'd just throw it up there in case you had. And that's our blend tanks, non-hazardous glycols that we use in heating our homes and DEF fuel for our diesel engines. Right now, most of the glycols coming into Anchorage come from Dow, and they come in rail cars. I actually make it on site. It's Alaska-made product.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no further questions from the commission here, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. And what's the will of the body? Motion by Commissioner Ron. And that's seconded by Commissioner Quinn. Commissioner Ron, you want to speak your motion?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. In case 2022-0004, I move that with respect to conditional use for bulk storage of hazardous materials within the I-2 heavy industrial district, that the board approve subject to staff recommendations numbers 1 and 2 on page 9 of the staff packet, noting that department recommendation number 3 would carry as advisory only.
Okay, and I think I noted that motion was seconded by Commissioner O'Quinn. Commissioner Ron, do you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I do intend to support the motion. I agree with staff's findings on items 1 through 9. I previously suggested for the record a change in some language. We heard some public testimony around concern for the management of chemicals. I appreciate the petitioner's response to those concerns and talking to the commission about how the applicant intends to manage and also what those chemicals are and how they're used in our everyday life. I do find this in conformance with the industrial zone that this use is proposed in, and with that I do intend to support the motion.
Commissioner O'Quinn?
Just add one other thing that we did hear testimony from the petitioner that the creation of this site wasn't because of an expansion necessarily, but it was a logistics move, and it was going to basically remove a round trip of the chemicals from Anchorage to Fairbanks and back to Anchorage by just leaving them here in Anchorage when they first arrive in the state. And to that end, I believe it is a net safety, it results in a more safe scenario for the chemicals.
I'll just go ahead and note briefly, to the extent it was maybe just implicit in Commissioner Ron's comments, that the location is really in the heart of industrial area too. It's surrounded on all sides by I-2 zoning, which I think helps support the approval criteria for this particular conditional use. Seeing no further comments, we'll call the vote.
Mr. Strike?
No.
Mr. Dimick?
Yes.
Mr. Strike, could I clarify that was a nay?
That is correct.
Thank you.
That motion passes. Next item on the agenda is item G2, case number 2021-0135. Can we hear from staff?
Thank you, Chair. The department proposes amendments to Title 21 to expand concurrent processing of applications for land use entitlements. These text amendments would allow the Planning and Zoning Commission to review and decide on applications for plats with rezones and more types of variances with conditional uses or major site plan reviews. This lets the Commission consider the entire development at the same time for a complete picture of the project. The amendments save the public time and frustration from having to testify at different public hearings for the same project. This also saves applicants from having to send different applications to different boards and commissions, which adds time and delay. These amendments do not change the approval criteria for these land use entitlements. Furthermore, the Commission will only be given concurrent review authority and not standalone case review powers for these plats and variances. Page 18 of your packet includes a letter of support from the University Area Community Council. And the department's staff analysis finds that the 3 approval criteria for a text amendment are met and is recommending approval for for the amendments. And the draft ordinance begins on page 4 of your packet. Thank you.
Commissioner Spinelli.
I was reading on pages 9 and 10. Start with 9. It's basically the same issue. It says, you back up, this is the areas where the Planning and Zoning Commission can have the decision-making authority. So variances when accompanied by conditional use or major site plan review, except variances authorized to be decided by Zoning Board of Examiners and Appeals. And my question is, if a lot of times when, say, a plat, it comes forward, it has a variance that might be reviewed either by the Platting Board or possibly UDC, would planning and zoning, if a plat and a rezone are coming to planning and zoning together, but it still required, say, a variance for curb type, would planning and zoning be able to do that at the same time, or would we still be stuck in the situation where they got to go back to a different board just for that variance?
Thank you for the question, Commissioner Spinelli. The curb type variance could be heard by the commission as well.
Because it doesn't specifically say platting. It specifically mentions conditional uses in major site plan reviews, but is it somewhere else that it says that, or I guess I was curious that there not be questions about this in the future.
Yeah, actually, a member of the public reached out to me with the same question that you're asking now, and we looked it up together and saw that it's already covered in existing code in one of the footnotes in the table. That's why I can speak so authoritatively, because we covered it this morning, and I just got asked the question today. So it's not a change that's needed in the ordinance. It's already there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't see any further questions pending. So I guess just to confirm that your presentation, Francis, is effectively the presentation from the petitioner for this case, and there's not a further presentation before we move to public?
You're right.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak to this matter? And if you could state your name for the record, speaking as an individual or as a representative of a group, please.
Good evening. My name is Brandon Marcotte. That's M-A-R-C-O-T-T. I'm a registered civil engineer here in Anchorage with experience in rezones, plats, and conditional use permits. I'm here tonight to show my support for the proposed amendments to Title 21, which would generally allow this body to consider projects with multiple cases under one review. Not only would this provide both planning and zoning and the community with a clearer picture of the entire development, but it would dramatically streamline the entitlement process as well. Of perhaps greater importance, it would give one body full authority over review of all entitlements associated with a multi-case development. No longer would we present a rezone to planning and zoning while presenting the plat to the platting board. I've been involved with quite a few projects now that had rezones run ahead of plats, then followed by conditional use permits. And I can tell you from experience that nothing is more confusing to the public than to run these processes in series rather than all together. It can certainly appear disingenuous to present a rezone to a community council without showing the plat or the site plan associated with a future conditional use. This almost immediately puts the community at odds with the development team. The proposed amendment language creates a full and complete picture of the development to both planning and zoning and to the community, while also truncating the overall timeline for the project from start to finish. I close and ask that the Commission support the proposed amendment changes presented to you in this case tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Anyone else wishing to speak? If you go ahead and state your name again when you start. Thank you.
Niall Sherwood Williams. With regards to the Title 21 changes, it is actually part of our Bill of Rights under the municipality of Anchorage to be free from a government of duplicitous nature, so having multiple agencies that serve the same end. So to that degree, to streamline those resources is very important. I was actually just having a discussion with the executive branch about this today with regards to records requests and things like that, and them not being streamlined. You have to submit it to the 57 different departments of the municipality, so it's ridiculously cumbersome. And the individuals on the ground, there's not a FOIA officer in every one of these agencies, so it creates some issues. The one thing I'd like to request that an amendment be added to protect the sovereign rights of the municipal citizens and the corporation. So something to the effect of, this cannot be an end around to have a federal governmental takeover, an authoritarian federal takeover, international takeover, or state takeover. We're still a home rule city, first-class municipality in the state of Alaska, so I would ask that the commission add some type of amendment to ensure our sovereignty as a municipality. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Anyone else wishing to speak? Okay, I don't see anyone else coming forward. Does staff have any rebuttal or additional comments to make?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Spinelli, I found the footnote that you were asking about, and reading from code, it says, quote, when the Planning and Zoning Commission, Urban Design Commission acts as the plating authority, they shall have variance authority over these sections as well. That's already in code, and that covers what your concern was, just to read it out to you from the code, and hopefully that gives confidence to the, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no one further, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. And what's the will of the body? A motion by Commissioner Spinelli.
Yeah, in the matter of case 2021-0135, I recommend approval to the Assembly.
Okay, that motion is seconded by Commissioner Krishna. Does anyone wish to speak to the motion?
I'll start by just saying I plan to support the motion. We heard unanimous public support, I believe, so I think that we should support it.
I'll just note, it seems like it's, in addition to being well supported by the community, it makes a lot of sense to just streamline and make the process smoother and faster, so I intend to support the motion. And seeing no other comments in the queue, we'll go ahead and call the vote.
Mr. Strike?
Yes.
Mr. Dibmake?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that motion passes 9-0. Next item on the agenda is case G3, which is case number 2022-0003. Can we hear from staff, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The Planning Department brings forward this ordinance which proposes several amendments to Title 21 in Anchorage Municipal Code and to the Anchorage, or to the Municipal Code of Regulations with the intent of simplifying the process for appeals of land use decisions. Over the past few years, the municipality has seen a substantial increase in land use appeals, and this has shed some light on some areas of improvement. First, to simplify the appeals process in front of the Board of Adjustment, this ordinance would amend Anchorage Municipal Code, Title 21, Chapter 3, subsection 050, to require the same appeals process for every appeal in front of the Board of Adjustment, rather than dictating a different procedure for appeals of preliminary plats. The distinct process for appeals of preliminary plats was unnecessarily confusing. All appeals to the Board of Adjustment will now begin with filing a notice of intent to appeal, followed by the underlying board or commission adopting written findings, and lastly, filing a notice of appeal. The preliminary notice of intent to appeal puts the municipality and the land use applicant on notice early in the process that an interested party intends to appeal. The second change the second purpose of this ordinance is to shift responsibility for initial tasks such as arranging for the appeal record and transcript from the municipal clerk's office to the planning department. The planning department provides staff support to the land use boards and commissions whose decisions are being appealed, so it is more efficient for the planning department to oversee these initial steps. Once the appeal record is complete, the planning department provides the record to the municipal clerk's office, who takes over responsibility for the next steps, which includes communications with parties on the appeal and accepting and dispersing appeal briefs. The third and final element of this ordinance is removing the new evidence change circumstances process available under existing code for the Planning and Zoning Commission, the Plating Board, and the Urban Design Commission. This process allows any interested party to raise supposed new issues for consideration by the decision-making body in lieu of filing an appeal. In practice, the process is fraught with confusion, especially as interested parties seek to use both this procedure and the appeal process simultaneously. The amendments proposed will help streamline the appeal process in front of land use appellant boards by creating a single process available to interested parties. The opportunity for the board and commission members to request reconsideration of any vote will in fact be retained. I would like to direct the commission to late comments laid on the table here tonight by the Anchorage Home Builders Association, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
So I guess I'll jump off. I'm curious what the department's thoughts are on the proposed changes that the Home Builders Association offered.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. There are several changes being offered by the home builders, none of which are of concern to the planning department. That being said, there are comments that would modify the duties of the clerk's office. We have forwarded the comments on to the clerk's office for comment, and we've, at this point, received nothing from them. This is going to be an ordinance that is considered by several boards to include the Board of Adjustment, so they'll have opportunities in the future to comment on it, but they have not at this point provided us with any comments for your consideration tonight.
And so, I mean, is that something that you would, to the extent that our recommendation, may or may not include amendments reflecting those changes, would waiting to hear what the clerk's office says, I mean, is that something that you would suggest?
Mr. Chair, we did get these late comments came Friday, I believe. As soon as I got the comments, I sent them on to legal, who then forwarded on to the clerk's office, who I believe did not have the time to provide us a response back. I would prefer not to delay this ordinance. I would like to move it on. I don't see any real problems with the recommended changes. The changes being offered to the clerk's office procedure are simply putting time limits on noticing requirements. I don't see that as being a big issue, and I wouldn't have a strong objection if you wanted to incorporate that into the ordinance.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I don't see anyone else in the queue here, so we'll go ahead and open this up to the public if there's anyone wishing to speak to this particular matter. And if you could please state your name for the record, whether as an individual or as a representative.
Hi, my name is Todd Brownson. I'm speaking as an individual. Addressing appeals of the plating board decisions have essentially just become an additional step in an already extremely arduous process required for any land use action in the municipality of Anchorage. Currently, it is well known that appealing a plating board decision will delay an approved land use action by about a year. Because of this and the fact that appeals can be filed for seemingly any reason, no matter how unfounded or frivolous the claims may be, the current process is relatively easy to apply for and bears a relatively small financial burden to the applicant. Conversely, there is a considerable amount of time, effort, and money required to address these appeals, which are often frivolous. For these reasons, I do not feel that the community as a whole is better served by simplifying this process. If any changes are made, please consider taking steps that would drastically reduce the time required to receive a decision to an appeal of an already approved land use action. Thank you.
Oh, I apologize. Before you begin, we had a question in the queue here I didn't notice. I don't know if that was for the prior speaker, Commissioner Ron.
It was. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I apologize for missing Mr. Brownson, but are you in favor or opposition to the proposed amendments?
I'm in opposition as proposed.
All right, thank you.
And I guess just for the record, he said he was in opposition as proposed. Okay. Go ahead, Sherwood Williams.
Hi, Niall Sherwood Williams. Whenever we have laid on the table items for code changes, I always give pause. I say, let's delay a little bit more. Just because of the notification to the public, it was, printed on January 7th, 2022 at 10:18 a.m. I'm not sure when it was actually made available to the public. What I will say is getting down to the actual language of these changes, we're definitely centralizing a lot of power with the municipal clerk. Quite specifically, some of the things that I believe will be struck down if you all put this through. Specifically flipping to page 8 of the main packet, forms of briefs. The municipal clerk shall only accept the timely filing of the briefs described in subsections A, B, and C above and only. Not accept a brief unless it is in the form prescribed by this subsection. People can write things on whatever form they want, whatever piece of paper, and they have to accept it by law. It's been tested all the way up to the Supreme Court. You can write a writ of habeas corpus, deliver it to the federal courthouse. It can be written on a little 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. If you look at the voting code changes that have occurred in the past couple of years, that also mimics this. The fact that you can actually, if you run out of ballots that are official, the designee of that voting place can say that any piece of paper will be accepted. So I have an issue with that. I don't agree with the other gentleman that the burden of cost is actually low for the person filing appeal. I believe it's actually very burdensome. By the time you get down to the nitty-gritty of the investment of time, the printing of the paperwork, the driving back and forth, the paying the bond fee, the risking your time and your money if you lose. If you lose, you get penalized. They'll come back and sue you. So I'd say again, I want this to be postponed. I'm looking for a unanimous vote, postponement. Thank you.
Anyone else here wishing to speak to it? And if you could state your name again for the record, please.
Good evening again. My name is Brandon Marcotte. That's M-A-R-C-O-T-T. Again, I've been involved with a number of projects that have been appealed over the past 2 years. These appeals have involved both platting actions as well as conditional use permits, and at the end of the day, have not resulted in any substantial changes to conditions associated with the proposed developments. Throughout these various appeals, it has become evident that the current language in Title 21 does not create a streamlined, informative process for either the developer or individuals wishing to appeal. While the proposed amendment language presented tonight is a step in the right direction, I would ask this commission to strongly consider Ms. Lipson's proposed language changes, which are included in your packet as additional comments. An appeal can delay a project for as long as a year. In the case of one particular project, it caused a 2-year delay. The establishment of deadlines and specific cutoff dates would greatly help in reducing this delay. These deadlines and cutoff dates could be placed in a flowchart and added to Title 21 for use as a roadmap for both parties. Additionally, creating formatting standards as outlined in Ms. Lipson's point number 2 would eliminate voluminous document submittals at inappropriate points in the process. In closing, I support the proposed amendment changes as I think they're a step in the right direction, but would encourage this commission to take additional steps needed to help streamline the process and make it more informative for everyone. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Seeing no one else here, I believe we have one person on scheduled to testify by phone.
Hello, this is Craig.
Good evening, Mr. Bennett. This is the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, holding a public hearing on text amendments for appeals. You have requested to testify. Please state your name, and you will have 3 minutes to testify on this item. And one other piece of information, that if you are live streaming this meeting in progress, then please mute that meeting to make it easier for you to speak. And you have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. This is Craig Bennett, B-E-N-N-E-T-T. And I will be quick. I've been involved in a number of appeals over the last few years, and I think this ordinance is definitely a step in the right direction. I also recommend Ms. Lipson's proposed changes in the supplemental packet. Anything we can do to make the process more efficient and clearer is good. There's also a timeline in the supplementary packet. As you can see, it takes a minimum of a year to get, once an appeal starts, to get approved or to get through it. And seen it a couple years to get an appeal process done. There is one change update that I would like the board to consider.
If you can turn to page 4 in the packet, under 4C2, in capital letters, it says, and must contain detailed and specific allegations of error. I'll just ask, who determines this, and could the planning director be the one who determines this and just allow verified appeals to move forward? And if they're frivolous, cut them off there just because of adding a year for frivolous appeals. This would be a good step to do it. And with that, if anyone has any questions for me.
Mr. Bennett, a quick question for you, just to confirm my understanding of the final point you were making. With reference to, on page 4, item C2 there, the detailed and specific allegations of error, if I understood your testimony correctly, you were questioning, how that would be interpreted and whether that is needed, but maybe I'll ask staff to confirm, but my read is that language will be deleted in this proposed amendment and will not be included in the revised language. Is that correct, staff?
Through the chair, yes.
That's kind of my understanding, and I'm just wanting, I guess, if there could be a step there that the planning director could review the cases, and I guess if it's a frivolous case, because that's typically what we've been seeing is they'll just, somebody will appeal and they won't need a reason. They can just say, I want to appeal, and, and then it locks it up for a year. I just think it'd be beneficial if there was someone, whether it's the planning director or the municipal attorney, could look at the case and say, yeah, that's, you need a specific allegation.
Okay, I understand your point. Thank you for that clarification.
Through the chair, if I may, I believe that purview lies with the Board of Adjustment, not with the planning director or the law department. I think that's my understanding of the code would be up to the Board of Adjustment to decide.
And so just to clarify my own understanding then, as a quick follow-up, so what exactly would it be that the Board of Adjustment would be deciding that you're referring to?
I think Mr. Bennett's concern is with respect to specific allegations of error. He's asking the planning department or the planning director to make the determination on whether or not there are specific allegations of error. I understand that we're omitting that language, but my response to his request there would be that the planning department or the planning director does not have that authority, and that the authority would lie with the Board of Adjustment.
Okay, so they would still evaluate to determine whether there is in fact a specific error that's been alleged?
That's correct.
Thank you. I don't see any further questions pending, so thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Okay, and seeing no one else waiting to testify, would staff like to provide a rebuttal to any of the points raised?
No, thank you.
Thank you. So with that, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. I see Commissioner Spinelli in the queue.
Yeah, I had a question for staff. So with the comments from Becky Lipson through the Anchorage Home Builders, what is your take on the best way for this commission to address these? If the commission was willing to entertain these changes, what would be the best way for us to do so?
Through the chair, Mr. Spinelli, good question. I would request that the commission establish which parts of the comments they either agree with or not, and direct the planning department to make modifications to the ordinance reflecting the changes that the commission deems appropriate. And we will forward that on to the next commission, so on and so forth, until we get to the assembly for their consideration.
Can I ask a question about timing too? And I guess we heard a comment about a concern with respect to how much time these materials were made available in advance of the meeting. And so I was wondering if you could just speak to when this first was available, and then from here, it sounds like there's a couple of steps that would take place before it even makes it to the assembly.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The ordinance, the proposed ordinance, has been accessible to the public for, well, we presented to the Federation of Community Councils several months ago. The ordinance has been out for public review for 30 plus days. The staff report was not available until the last 7 days, which is typical. As you mentioned, this is a rather lengthy approval process, given the fact that it is an amendment to code that affects several boards and commissions. It has to go to those boards and commissions for consideration before it goes to the assembly for consideration and adoption. So from here, it will go to the Planning Board, the Urban Design Commission, the Board of Adjustment, and then on to the assembly. So there'll be numerous opportunities to testify.
Thank you. Commissioner Ron.
Thank you, through the chair. Seeking clarification on that last comment, does this not go to those subsequent boards until this commission has acted on the matter?
Through the chair, Mr. Ron, good question. No, the code does not dictate the order for which the ordinance goes to each respective board or commission. It just so happens in this case that the Planning and Zoning Commission's meeting came first. I think that normally speaking, we would have you act on it last, but given the fact that you were first, it comes to you first. So the code doesn't dictate a specific order, however.
Sorry, another follow-up question on the same kind of general topic. Do you know what are the dates that it's scheduled to be heard before the other bodies?
I don't know the dates, but we will be presenting this to the Planning Board and Urban Design Commission in February, the first meeting in February.
Okay, thank you.
And then we have not scheduled at this point a meeting of the Board of Adjustment for their consideration and comment.
Commissioner Ron.
Thank you, through the chair. So notwithstanding our action or potential deferral of action tonight on this, would the planning department for those subsequent commission and board meetings look to further evaluate and potentially incorporate the comments that we have before us on the table tonight into its staff packet presentation recommendations to those subsequent boards?
Through the chair, Mr. Ron, potentially. If it's the desire of this commission to incorporate those comments, certainly we can do that.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. I guess at this point we'll be looking for a motion. What's the will of the body? Oh, and sorry, if I haven't already, I'll confirm that the public hearing is closed at this point. We do have a question from Commissioner Polis.
3 days seems tight to me for a municipal clerk ruling when he couldn't rule on this particular matter either. Does that give you heartburn at all?
Through the chair, Mr. Polis, if I can offer a follow-up question to your question. Do you mean the 3-day noticing?
Yeah. From the municipal clerk.
I believe that it is reasonable to expect notice within 3 days. Of course, I would have wished or desired that the clerk's office provide me with some sort of comment to that request, but understanding the process, I believe 3 days is appropriate.
Okay, and that was my only other worry, was municipal clerk hadn't weighed in on this yet, so.
And I would offer that if this commission decides to adopt those findings, that could ultimately be amended should the clerk's office take issue. As I've said before, this is an ordinance that needs to go to the assembly for adoption. If the clerk's office says 5 days is more appropriate, you know, the assembly could make that amendment.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ron?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Understanding we don't have a positive motion on the floor for discussion, I just want to check procedure. I would have interest in entertaining a brief discussion by the commission if there's common interest in perhaps asking the department to more formally evaluate and incorporate the comments we have from Lipscomb before us. We've heard public testimony in opposition and in favor. What I heard from planning staff is that we're not a cog that if we decided to defer, we would be holding up the process and that it could move forward. But I'm hesitant to formally act in terms of approval or denial at this stage tonight.
So maybe if staff could clarify, if that was the intent, would it just be a motion to postpone before we have a formal motion to approve on the table?
Through the chair, that's correct. Motion to postpone. Through the chair, if I may, these comments the planning department is willing to accept. If the commission decided that these were appropriate, we would certainly incorporate them into the ordinance and move them along. I'd love to hear Mr. Ron's concern with doing that, or maybe there is no concern and that the commission would rather not take action on this until this has gone to the Planning Board or Urban Design Commission. But we're happy to incorporate these comments into the ordinance and move it.
Thank you. I see Commissioner Ron back in the queue. Or is that from before?
Happy to hold my place now and act on that by a quick response. I appreciate the verbal confirmation. My concerns are around the 3 business days, locking in someone outside of the planning department who it would appear we've only given 3 days, perhaps to weigh in on that point, as well as item 3, the cost of appeal. I have general concern, while I see this as the public commented a step in the right direction, of creating potential barriers to public participation, and cost is one of those. I see there's reference in this comment to, as it's done with ZEBA in terms of returning 1/2 of the fee if the decision is reversed in part. I would be more comfortable if law took a look at that for the reasons as stated. So those are my 2 concerns in terms of acting on it tonight.
Through the chair, Mr. Ron, and I agree with your concern and I appreciate it with respect to cost. And for that reason, I did bring it to the law department, and the deputy or assistant municipal attorney did agree that that was a change she saw as appropriate.
Commissioner O'Quinn?
Would staff maybe make a suggestion as to how we would structure a motion to integrate the comments of Ashburn and Mason?
Through the chair, Mr. O'Quinn, I would, and maybe I'll just give you an example of what the motion might look like. Recommend approval of the ordinance with modifications, and then you would state your modifications depending on what comments of Ms. Lipson's you were supportive of.
Commissioner Spinelli.
I would, if I'm okay if we don't end up doing this tonight, but I just feel like we should go ahead and make the motion to recommend approval. I'm going to start with as recommended, or recommend approval to the Anchorage Assembly as recommended by staff in our packet to get things started. And if I...
Well, I think we're...
Well, I guess we need a second.
Yeah, waiting for a second on this. Seconded by Commissioner Ron.
Yeah, so I don't know if I intend to support the motion I made as stated. I would like to see some of the things in the Ashburn-Mason letter implemented. Part of, and I think the public testimony that I heard was the public testimony against the case had mentioned that the timeline is too long. And I think that maybe with some of these recommended changes, this might be even to the testimony in opposition might actually be in favor of this. Because what has been happening is there is actually no timeline in code for the clerk's office. And the clerk's office isn't really making a determination or anything. They're just notifying the planning department or the appellee that somebody filed a letter of intent to, or, the letter of intent or the actual appeal, or I guess a brief also. And I don't think, maybe it should be 5 days, but I don't think forwarding on a correspondence, if there's no real job, that's my understanding, that they're doing other than saying, hey, we got this letter here, somebody's going to appeal your project, and then they'll notify the planning department and the appellee. And that's what I think the Home Builders Association had wanted when they started asking about this. I don't, it must have been months ago. It was a previous administration when this all started. So I'm in favor of all the recommendations from Ashburn and Mason, but I guess I'd love to hear if how the rest of the commission feels about it.
Commissioner Ron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Commissioner Spinelli, I appreciate your commentary and industry experience and additional context. Given staff's verbal confirmation to the concerns I had, I'm over those concerns now and willing to act on the motion we have on the table. Sounds like Commissioner Spinelli is open to some amendment, and if I could go ahead and amend the motion on the table, it would be that we include as recommendations a few items from that Lipson comments. And where I'm at with it is including item 1 with respect to streamlining the appeal process as proposed, changing 3 business days to 5 business days in all occurrences. That's for items 1 and 2. For item 2, I would, in my amendment, seek to exclude the formatting requirements. I can speak to that in a minute. And I would propose that we include the recommended changes in item 3, given staff's support of it. So if I haven't taken us too far off track, embedded in my commentary was a proposed amendment to the motion.
So I guess to confirm my understanding of the motion, so you're looking to amend the main motion to incorporate the suggested changes from Rebecca Lipson, and that's all items in number 1, changing 3 business days to 5 business days where it's there. You are not including in your motion a recommendation for item number 2 to be included, but you are including item number 3.
That's correct.
Okay, maybe Commissioner Ron, if you could confirm that that motion matches your intent.
That works for me.
Okay, is there a second? You might need to click the move button first. Okay, that motion is seconded by Commissioner Krishna. I know we've had Commissioner O'Quinn waiting patiently in the queue, so I'll turn to him at this point.
I would just like to say I think it's important that we move this forward, and I appreciate the amendment offered by Commissioner Ron. I would support the amendment if we included the page limitation, because I think, as Ms. Lipscomb pointed out in her comments, the appeals can get kind of long, and I don't know that it's often necessary that they be so long, given the issues at stake typically.
And so my understanding, Commissioner O'Quinn, and I'll let staff correct me if I'm wrong, but that this amendment that's pending is to add items 1 and 3, and it doesn't preclude a later amendment to add item number 2 to the main motion. That's to say, if you wanted to move to add item number 2 after we resolve this motion, you could do so.
Roger that, thanks.
Commissioner Krishna?
Thank you. I don't think I support the amendment as stated by Commissioner Ron, and the reason is if you look at the letter from Ashburn and Mason, for the first item, their issue was, they're referring to a case where the clerk's office failed to provide service of notice until a week after all parties had been served the e-filing, and my concern is that the 5 days doesn't necessarily solve that issue. So I would prefer to see it as stated with 3 days. Thank you.
Commissioner Ron?
If friendly amendments to amendments are allowed, I would be accepting of that on the condition that the statement raised by Commissioner Krishna is not otherwise bound or affected by timing associated with that e-notice. I had a slightly different interpretation. I didn't see that as a binding element of the timeline as described. But if in fact that is the case, I am in full agreement and think that we should pull forward to whatever is necessary to get the job done according to that timeline. And Commissioner Krishna, that's not a question to you, but perhaps one that I should punt over to staff. If you're following the discussion, can you help inform me and the commission about that e-filing timeline? Is there an importance of 3 days versus 5 days?
Through the chair to the commission, unfortunately, I'm not as familiar with the clerk's office procedure or process as I'd like to be, so I can't really speak to the e-filing procedure and the timeline 3 versus 5. I'm sorry, I'd love to be more help, but I, in this case, cannot.
So Commissioner Ron, where does that leave your intent with your motion?
While a large part of me still agrees with what was raised by Commissioner Spinelli and my initial concerns of 3 days being potentially tight, as questioned by other commissioners, staff has said they're accepting of these comments, and there's, as stated, 3 business days. So we won't be the last commission to hear this, and so I'm fine with the friendly amendment to revert back to 3.
Okay, so you're clarifying that your proposed amendment was to keep it with the original 3 days. Commissioner Krishna, as you seconded, does your second still stand?
It does, yes.
I guess I'll just note briefly, my own sense of the motion is I do have a little bit of concerns without having heard from the clerk's office, but I think it makes very good sense to have a clear deadline included. So from that perspective, I support the intent of those proposed changes. The one piece that gives me some pause with respect to timing, I agree that it should be pretty straightforward, although I note that one of the notice requirements is to provide notice of the cost of preparing the record, and I have no idea what that process looks like and how long it takes to evaluate what it would look like to pull the record together. So that piece in particular gives me some pause. But I guess where my current thoughts are is there will be opportunity, I think, if that is an issue, to confirm that, and this process is still moving forward. There'll be comments from a lot of other boards. And so I think I would support the motion, but to make clear as a finding that I would ask, I guess, the Assembly if to consider that timeline if additional information comes in from the clerk's office, and make sure that there is time in particular for that one, and maybe the 3 days for that one alone for determining the cost of the record may need to be extended, while the other ones could remain shorter, but to just make sure to incorporate any information that's received on that point. Okay, seeing no further questions or comments, we will go ahead and call the vote on this motion to amend the main motion.
Mr. Strike?
Yes.
Mr. Dimick?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that motion passes with 9 yay votes. We now have the main motion before us. Commissioner Krishna.
I would like to make an amendment to the main motion to include the recommendation from the Home Builders Association that was item number 2 in the supplemental packet, relating to formatting requirements and page limitations.
I'm sorry. Her motion was to...
Okay, Commissioner Christian, I think you may need to, now that we've got something up there, if that is consistent with your motion, to hit it. Okay, seconded by Commissioner O'Quinn. And if anyone would like to speak to the motion. I'll go ahead and I guess for myself, say that I would support this motion. The reason identified in the letter for the motion is they pointed out that someone tries to kind of cram the details of an argument into a notice of appeal to avoid the page limitations on the briefs themselves. And I can see that being a potential problem. That makes perfect sense to me. And from my experience dealing with appeals, the notice of appeal itself, really its only purpose is to do just that, provide notice to the parties and the court that an appeal will be filed without including any argument, and it's common to have some sort of basic limitation consistent with what's proposed here. So for that reason, I would support the motion. Commissioner Ron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to my fellow commissioners, I was intentional, as you all probably noticed, in excluding that initially. While I can appreciate the intent of the language, I struggle with taking an approach of trying to be so prescriptive when, for lack of a better term, opportunity to game the system will still exist. And I find the language in code as it currently exists, as well as the department's proposed changes, as being sufficient in trying to guide the system to a more efficient outcome, and therefore don't see need to further try and ratchet that in.
Okay, I don't see any further comments, so we'll go ahead and call the vote on this motion to amend the main motion.
Mr. Strike?
Yes.
Mr. Dimick?
Yes.
That motion passes 8-1. So now, pending before us, we're back to the main motion as amended. Okay, and seeing no further comments here as well, we can go ahead and vote.
Mr. Strike?
Yes.
Mr. Dimick?
Yes.
That motion passes as well. Okay, thank you, everyone. I think the only thing left is to get a motion to adjourn. Moved by Commissioner O'Quinn and seconded by Commissioner Spinelli.
Thank you.
Thank you, Greg and Matt.